Today, we are diving into what is, without a doubt, the absolute peak of ancient Egyptian civilization, the New Kingdom. Now, this was an era of almost unbelievable wealth, incredible power, and, of course, legendary pharaohs. We're talking about names you know, names that still echo through history. Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten, and Ramesses the Great. We're going to explore how this mighty empire was born from a rebellion, how it went on to conquer the known world, and what, in the end, led to its spectacular collapse.
But here's the thing, this golden age didn't just pop up out of nowhere. No, it was forged in the fire of rebellion. See, before the New Kingdom, Egypt was actually a divided land. The whole northern part of the country was under the control of foreign rulers called the Hyksos. The native Egyptian pharaohs, they were stuck down in the south, in the city of Thebes, basically forced to pay tribute to these foreign kins. Tensions had been simmering for decades, and all it needed was one very weird spark to ignite a full-blown war of liberation.
And that spark came in one of the strangest ways you could possibly imagine. The war for Egypt's very soul, the conflict that would go on to create an empire, was all kicked off by a truly absurd royal message. I mean, this story is almost too strange to be true. According to an ancient document, the Salier Papyrus, the Hyksos king Apophis sends a message to the Theban ruler Seqenenre. And the complaint? Get this. He claims that the sound of hippos splashing around in a pool in Thebes, a city 400 miles to the south, was keeping him up at night in his capital city. Of course, this wasn't really about noisy hippos. It was a power play, right? A thinly veiled threat meant to show everyone who was boss and humiliate the Egyptian king. Well, the Thebans got the message loud and clear. Seqenenre himself may have actually died in battle. His mummy shows these horrific axe wounds to the head. But his son, Kamose, he was having none of it. His response, which he had carved on a monument, was just pure fire. This wasn't about hippos anymore. This was about freedom. The war was on.
So this war of liberation, it fundamentally changed the Egyptian mindset. You have to remember, for the first time in centuries, they'd been invaded and occupied. That kind of experience leaves a deep scar, and it created this powerful resolution: never again. After they drove out the Hyksos, Egypt's entire foreign policy shifted. It went from being defensive to being aggressively expansionist. They decided they would build a massive empire to act as a giant buffer zone just to make sure no one could ever threaten the homeland again.
Kamose's younger brother, Ahmose, was the one who ultimately finished the job. And what's so incredible is that we actually know the details of his campaign thanks to the autobiography of a soldier who fought in the war, a guy named Ahmose, son of Abana. He recorded the whole thing step by step. And you can see they didn't just kick the Hyksos out. No, they pursued them all the way into Palestine and laid siege to their final stronghold for 3 long years. This was a total, decisive knockout victory. And this victory kicks off the 18th dynasty, the real start of the New Kingdom. Thebes becomes the new religious and political capital. And the local god of Thebes, Amun-Ra, gets this massive promotion to become the supreme god of the entire empire. All this wealth from foreign tribute starts pouring in, and that's what funds the construction of those legendary temples of Karnak and Luxor. And, to protect their burials from tomb robbers, the pharaohs create a secret, sacred cemetery, the Valley of the Kings. This new imperial power hits its absolute peak under Thutmose III. People often call him the Napoleon of Egypt, and for good reason. The man was a military genius of the highest order. For 2 decades, he personally led at least 16 campaigns into the Near East, crushing his enemies at famous battles like the Siege of Megiddo. He pushed Egypt's borders farther than they had ever been or would ever be again, creating a massive empire stretching all the way from Nubia to the Euphrates River. So, at the very height of its power and influence, just when Egypt seemed absolutely invincible, the empire was suddenly thrown into chaos. But the threat this time, it didn't come from a foreign enemy. It came from the throne itself. So this pharaoh, Amenhotep IV, he launches one of the most radical religious revolutions in all of history. He completely abandons the entire pantheon of Egyptian gods, especially the super-powerful state god Amun-Ra. He even changes his own name to Akhenaten, which means beneficial to the Aten, and declares that there's only one true god, the Aten, represented as the physical disk of the sun.
The changes he made were just staggering. He didn't just introduce a new god, he shut down the temples of the old ones, which basically dismantled the massive economic and political power of the priesthood of Amun-Ra. He abandoned the ancient capital Thebes and built a brand new city out in the desert called Amarna, and then he declared that only he and his family could worship the Aten directly, making himself the sole middleman between humanity and God. It was a political, economic, and cultural earthquake that just upended 1,000 years of tradition. But this revolution didn't outlive its creator. After Akhenaten's death, his young son, who was originally named Tutankhaten, takes the throne, and probably under a lot of pressure from the old establishment, he quickly changes his name to Tutankhamun, signaling a complete return to the old god Amun. He abandons his father's city, moves the court right back to Thebes, and issues a decree to restore order to the land, pretty much systematically erasing his father's entire revolution from history.
Okay, so after all the chaos of that Amarna period, a new dynasty of military men came to power. And these guys were determined to restore Egypt's glory, reestablish its dominance abroad, and leave a legacy that would last for eternity. This was the empire's final magnificent blaze of glory. This whole era is known as the Ramesside period, and there's a really good reason why. A staggering 11 different pharaohs took the name Ramesses, ruling for nearly 2 centuries and completely defining this final age of imperial greatness. And the greatest of them all was, without a doubt, Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great. The man ruled for an astonishing 67 years, and he really became the archetype of the ultimate pharaoh. He was a celebrated warrior, a clever diplomat, and above all, he was a builder on a scale the world had just never seen. His goal was simple: to carve his name so deeply and so widely into the stones of Egypt that he could never, ever be forgotten. His reign was basically a masterclass in power and propaganda. Early on, he fought the rival Hittite Empire to a standstill at the legendary Battle of Kadesh. 16 years later, he turns around and signs the world's first recorded international peace treaty with those same Hittites. He built on a colossal scale, everything from the great halls at Karnak to the incredible rock-cut temples of Abu Simbel. And he showed off his longevity by celebrating the Seed Festival, a kind of royal jubilee, an unprecedented 14 times, making sure his divine status was never in doubt. But you know how these stories go. No empire lasts forever. Following that peak of Ramesside power, new threats started to emerge from beyond Egypt's borders. The world was changing, and a storm was gathering that would threaten to sweep away everything the New Kingdom had built. They are still one of history's great mysteries. A shadowy coalition of migratory tribes, sea raiders, and displaced warriors known to the Egyptians simply as the Sea Peoples. They just swept across the eastern Mediterranean like a tidal wave, toppling ancient empires and leaving a trail of fire and destruction in their wake. And during the reigns of Merneptah and Ramesses III, they finally set their sights on the ultimate prize, the riches of Egypt. So Pharaoh Ramesses III manages to fight them off in a series of brutal land and sea battles, which are famously carved on the walls of his temple at Medinet Habu. He literally saved Egypt from total collapse. But it was what we call a Pyrrhic victory. The wars completely exhausted the Egyptian economy and its military. So, yeah, Egypt survived, but its empire did not. Its grip on its foreign territories was broken for good. Those wars with the Sea Peoples may have been won, but they really exposed an empire that was rotting from the inside out. The treasury was empty. Ramesses III himself was actually assassinated in a palace conspiracy. With the central government weakening, corruption was everywhere. We even have court documents from this time, like the Abbott Papyrus, that detail organized gangs systematically looting the sacred tombs in the Valley of the Kings. The Golden Age was well and truly over. After a whole succession of rulers who were weaker and weaker, the New Kingdom officially came to an end with the death of its last king, Ramesses XI. After almost 500 years of unparalleled power, wealth, and influence, the era of Egypt's great empire was finally over. And this leaves us with a final, really powerful question. The political entity of the New Kingdom, it vanished. The empire built by Thutmose III was lost, and the gold that funded the temples of Ramesses the Great was all gone. But the legacy? The tombs in the Valley of the Kings, the story of the heretic Akhenaten, the very idea of pharaonic power, that endured for thousands of years. It really makes you wonder, when a great power falls, what is truly lost and what, somehow, becomes eternal?